Sweat was dripping down my body as I watched those two men in the resort pool. One of them, in particular, kept staring at me. My name is Ethan. I'm 32 years old, and I design boats for commercial fishing companies. My life was all deadlines, meetings, and technical drawings until 2 weeks ago when I decided I needed a break. Breaking up with Ricardo after 3 years together, plus the stress of finishing 5 projects in record time, nearly drove me over the edge. This resort in Florida seemed like the perfect place to hide from the world. No friends, no commitments, just me, the ocean, and the promise of solitude I so desperately needed. At least, that was the plan until that third day, when everything changed. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. My cottage was just a few steps away from the beach. A little oasis with light blue walls and huge windows that let the sound of the waves fill every corner. I had almost a religious routine: wake up with the sun, run on the damp sand for an hour, then head back for breakfast on the porch while watching pelicans dive into the sea. Mornings were for reading or swimming, always keeping my distance from the other guests. At lunch, I chose the farthest table in the main restaurant, where I could sketch new boat designs without interruption. In the evenings, a whiskey on the porch became my favorite ritual, watching the stars seem brighter out here, far from the city. This is how you mend a broken heart, I thought to myself, convinced that isolation was the best remedy. The third day started off differently. A bunch of executives had taken over the resort, and when I got to the pool after my morning run, my usual spot, a lounge chair under a palm tree, was taken. I stood there like a fool, holding my towel and book, ready to give up and head back to the cottage, when a soft voice surprised me. "It seems like you really value your space. We got an extra chair right here." I looked in the direction of the voice. A guy about 26 years old with tousled dark hair and stylish sunglasses was watching me with a half smile. Next to him, an older man, maybe around 34, tanned and clearly in shape, was fiddling with his phone without paying any attention to our conversation. Alex Reeves. He introduced himself as he extended his hand when I came over hesitantly. "And this workaholic here is my friend Dylan." Dylan finally looked up from his phone, flashing a confident smile. "Hey man, welcome to our little refuge from chaos. Are you also running away from something or someone?" The question was casual, but it hit a nerve. I sat down in the offered lounge chair, trying to keep it together. "Ethan Miller. I just needed some time to think. Mysterious man." Dylan laughed as he put his phone away. "Alex here is a game designer. I work in marketing. And you? What keeps you busy when you're not being mysterious at resorts?" "I design boats," I replied simply, realizing it was the first real conversation I'd had in days. What surprised me was how Alex seemed to be studying me silently, while Dylan steered the conversation with stories about corporate parties and exotic trips. There was something in Alex's attentive look that made me feel both uncomfortable and intrigued. In the following days, it was impossible not to run into Alex and Dylan. The resort, despite its vastness, kept bringing us together, in the restaurant, on the stone paths between the cottages on the beach. Dylan was outgoing and charismatic, always surrounded by people from the convention, while Alex stayed more reserved, as if he was more comfortable in his friend's shadow. Over a casual lunch, I found out that Alex and I shared a passion for design, even if we worked in different fields. "You see structural lines kind of like I see algorithms," Alex commented as we watched an art exhibit in the main lobby. Dylan had abandoned us to take some work calls. Everything has a pattern, some internal logic. That afternoon, we lost ourselves in conversations about creative processes, technical challenges, and the beauty of functionality. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax, the constant tension easing as we talked. Alex had a way of listening that made me feel truly understood. I never thought I'd meet someone who gets my obsession with perfect lines and curves. I admitted, surprising even myself with how open I was getting. Alex smiled, his eyes meeting mine for a beat too long to be just casual. The best connections happen when you least expect them. On the 5th night, after a dinner where Dylan entertained the entire restaurant with tales of his ad campaigns, I realized I was paying too much attention to Alex. Watching the way his hands moved as he talked, the sound of his quiet laugh, the way his sunglasses slid down his nose when he leaned forward. I didn't come here for this. I murmured to my reflection in the bathroom mirror after getting back to the cottage. The plan was recovery, isolation, peace, not this growing attraction to a stranger who was probably only here for a few days. Also, the dynamic between Alex and Dylan left me confused. Sometimes they seemed like just friends, but other times Dylan's possessive gestures made me pull back. The fact that Dylan was always around when Alex and I started to get close felt more than just a coincidence. At the pool the next morning, I decided to keep my distance. Alex waved from afar, but I stayed in my freshly claimed lounge chair, pretending to be totally absorbed in my book. I managed to keep up the act for almost an hour until I felt a shadow block the sun. "Are you avoiding me, Ethan Miller?" Alex said with a playful tone, though his eyes showed genuine concern. "Dylan's in meetings all day today. I thought maybe we could check out that nature trail you mentioned yesterday." I hesitated, torn between what I wanted and what made sense. My time at the resort was running out, just 5 days left before I had to go back to reality. Starting anything new now seemed reckless. "Dylan mentioned you guys are leaving soon," I replied, trying to sound casual. Alex sat on the edge of my lounge chair, too close for me to keep my composure. "And does that stop you from enjoying the moment?" That eco trail was just the beginning. We walked side by side among palm trees and tropical vegetation, the distant sound of the waves creating the perfect backdrop for our occasional silence. As the day passed, the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble. "Have you always been this reserved?" Alex asked when we stopped at a natural lookout, with the ocean stretching out endlessly before us. The sun was beginning to set, turning the sky into a warm palette of colors. "Not always," I said, leaning on the wooden railing, feeling the salty breeze on my face. "I guess I learned to protect myself after a few disappointments." Alex came closer so that our shoulders nearly touched. "The last one must have been pretty significant to bring you here." Normally I would have changed the subject, but there was something about Alex that broke down my defenses. I told him about Ricardo, about the 3-year relationship that ended when he admitted he never really could commit, about how I threw myself into work to avoid the void he left behind. "And you?" I asked, finally looking him straight in the eyes. "What brought you here with Dylan?" Alex smiled, that subtle smile I was beginning to adore. Dylan closed a big deal and decided to celebrate by bringing his best gay friend to a resort. His words, not mine. He laughed softly. "I guess he thinks he's doing me a favor, introducing me to single executives." "And is he?" I couldn't help but ask. Not when the only person who's caught my interest is determined to keep her distance. His eyes met mine, and I felt that electric current I'd been trying to ignore since the first time we met. We walked back in silence, closer than before, our arms brushing occasionally as we moved. In the lobby, we found Dylan surrounded by his colleagues, all with colorful drinks and lively conversation. "There you are," Dylan exclaimed when he saw us, throwing an arm around Alex's shoulder. "I thought you two got kidnapped by Florida pirates. Come on, we're having our official send-off." Alex shot me an apologetic look as he was dragged into the group. I considered heading back to my cottage, but Dylan was already handing me a drink, insisting I meet real people after days of chatting only with fish. The night went on, and I found myself genuinely entertained by Dylan's contagious energy and his circle of friends. A couple of hours and a few drinks later, the small celebration moved on to the resort's main bar, where a pianist was playing soft jazz in the background. Alex and I ended up sitting side by side at the counter, while Dylan dazzled everyone with an elaborate story about an ad campaign that saved the company from bankruptcy. "Has he always been like that?" I asked, leaning close so only Alex could hear. "Since college. He's the gravitational center of every place he's in." Alex twirled his glass between his fingers, watching his friend. "It's exhausting, but reassuring at the same time." "Have you ever?" I left the question hanging, unable to finish it. Alex chuckled quietly. "Dylan? No, not really. He's straight to the core. I'm just a friend he shows off to prove he's open-minded." There was affection in his voice, despite the irony. "Besides, he's not the one who's been on my mind lately." His knee brushed against mine under the counter, an accidental touch that exchanged a look full of meaning between us. Dylan chose that moment to take an important phone call and walked off toward the terrace, gesturing animatedly. Have you ever wondered what it'd be like if we'd met at another time, somewhere else? Alex asked softly, his eyes fixed on his drink, but his hand discreetly reaching out to touch my fingers. The touch was like an electric current running through my body. The low light of the bar cast golden shadows on his face, highlighting the defined line of his jaw and the subtle movement of his throat as he swallowed in anticipation. The soft scent of his cologne mixed with the salty aroma of the ocean coming through the open windows, creating a fragrance I would forever associate with this moment. I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be, I replied, finally allowing myself to embrace what I've been denying for days. Dylan's going to be busy with calls until late, Alex murmured, leaning in even closer. My cottage has an ocean view you need to see. Our eyes met, and no further words were needed. The tension that had been building silently for days was now palpable between us. I hesitated for just a moment before nodding, my heart pounding like waves in a storm. We left separately, with just a few minutes between us. A needless precaution since Dylan and his colleagues were completely absorbed in their own celebrations. The walk to Alex's cottage never felt so long, each step amplifying the anticipation growing inside me. When we finally met on the porch of his cottage, any pretense of casual conversation vanished. The moonlight streamed in through the open glass doors, lighting up the space in shades of silver and deep blue. For a moment, we just looked at each other, as if we were both taking in that this was really happening. Alex was the first to move, slowly coming closer. Since that first day by the pool, he whispered, when you seemed so determined not to need anyone. His hands found my face, and when our lips finally met, it was like a dam had broken inside me. All the control I'd held onto for days, years, maybe, crumbled away. His lips were softer than I had imagined, moving against mine with a kind of urgency that matched my own. My hands found their way to his waist, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. We backed into the cottage together, moving as fluidly as in an impromptu dance. The door closed behind us, and the outside world ceased to exist. I was afraid you'd never let this happen, Alex murmured against my neck, his hands already working the buttons of my shirt with a confidence that spoke of experience. Me too, I confessed, my voice barely recognizable to my own ears. Our clothes formed a trail across the floor, all the way to the bed. Seeing Alex in the moonlight took my breath away. His defined features, sun-kissed skin, eyes that reflected desire without reservation. When our bodies finally came together, skin against skin, I felt a shiver run down my spine, as if every nerve ending was waking up for the first time. You're even more beautiful than I imagined, he whispered, his hands exploring my body with reverence. We tumbled together onto the cool sheets, a tangle of limbs and quickened breaths. Every touch felt amplified, every sensation more intense than anything I could remember. Alex guided my body with an instinctive know-how, as if he could read my desires before I even recognized them. My lips trailed a path over his chest, moving slowly, savoring how his breathing grew more erratic with every kiss. When I finally took him into my mouth, the sound that escaped his lips was the sweetest reward. His hands tangled in my hair, not controlling, but connecting even more deeply with me. Ethan, he moaned, my name turning into a prayer on his lips. We moved together as if we'd done 1,000 times before, our bodies finding a natural rhythm that started slow and deliberate, each motion savored and appreciated. Alex led me into him with soft words and precise touches, and when we finally became one, it felt like I'd found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Our rhythm gradually intensified like a rising tide, powerful, inescapable, and primal. Alex's fingers pressed against my back, leaving temporary marks that would fade by morning, but whose memory would be forever etched on my skin. Our gazes stayed locked, an intimacy that went beyond the physical, making every sensation deeper and more meaningful. When climax hit us, It was almost simultaneous, a burst of sensations that left us trembling and breathless, clinging to each other like survivors of a perfect storm. In that suspended moment, we were only two intertwined bodies, synchronized breaths, sweat merging with the sea breeze coming through the windows. We collapsed together on the rumpled sheets, still connected, reluctant to break the bond we had created. Alex traced gentle patterns on my chest as our breathing slowed, and I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time, maybe ever, in quite this way. Was it worth waiting 5 days? I asked with a smile, my fingers playing with a stray lock of his hair. Alex laughed softly, the sound echoing against my chest. I'd wait a lot longer. We lay there in silence for a while, watching the shadows of the palm trees dance on the ceiling, the only sounds being the waves breaking on the shore and our now calm breaths. Alex turned to me, propping himself on his elbow, his eyes studying my face as if trying to memorize every detail. That was unexpected, he murmured, a slight smile playing on his lips still tinted red from our kisses. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting myself truly feel the emotions I'd repressed for so long. The vulnerability I'd always avoided now seemed not only acceptable but necessary. I came here to escape connections, not to form them, I admitted, turning to face him. But this feels right somehow. Alex nodded in understanding. Sometimes we find exactly what we need when we stop looking, he replied, his eyes reflecting a mix of vulnerability and contentment that mirrored my own feelings. He reached out to trace the line of my jaw, a touch so gentle it almost hurt. Dylan asked me why I'd been so distracted these past few days. I said I came to relax, not to be sulking around like a teenager. Mentioning Dylan brought the reality back into the room. I glanced at the digital clock on the bedside table, 1:37 in the morning. Is he going to notice that you're out late? I asked, though I wasn't really worried at that moment, still wrapped up in the little bubble we had created. Alex shook his head. Dylan drank enough to sleep until noon. Besides, he hesitated, biting his lower lip. He had his own company when we left him at the bar. Some girl company, I guess, I commented, pulling him even closer, not wanting to lose the warmth of his body. Obviously, Dylan never passes up an opportunity. Alex traced circles on my chest, thoughtful. In fact, he thinks he's doing me a favor by bringing me here to meet interesting men, a sort of ultra-confident straight wingman. I laughed softly, picturing the extroverted Dylan in that role. In a way, he kind of succeeded. He hasn't got a clue. Alex smiled, kissing my shoulder. And he doesn't need to know. Some things are just ours to keep. Those words awakened something in me. The idea that this moment, this connection, was something precious and private, separate from the world out there with its expectations and complications. It wasn't just about physical desire, but about finding understanding in an unexpected place, about lowering carefully built defenses and allowing yourself to truly be seen. What are you thinking about? Alex asked, studying my expression. About how weird it is to find clarity in the arms of someone I barely know, I admitted honestly. I spent months trying to figure out what went wrong with Ricardo, why I was never enough for him. And now, here with you, you realize it was never about being enough. Alex finished softly, showing that intuitive understanding that had attracted me from the start. Some people just aren't capable of giving us what we need, no matter how hard we try to change or adapt for them. I nodded, feeling a wave of emotion sweep over me. For months, I had carried this feeling of inadequacy like an anchor, letting it define my interactions and my view of myself. In that bed with Alex, I felt that weight beginning to dissolve. I could stay like this until dawn, I confessed, pulling him into another kiss, slower and deeper than before. Alex responded with equal intensity, his hand sliding over my body, reigniting a desire that had never really faded. Who said we have to stop at dawn? We lost ourselves in each other again, this time with less urgency and more exploration. Every touch was a discovery, every sigh a wordless conversation. The outside world, Dylan, the convention, our inevitable return to our real lives, melted away in the shadows beyond the moonlit bed. Hours later, exhausted and sated, we fell asleep in each other's arms, the sound of the waves lulling our sleep. My last conscious thought was that, no matter what happened later, this moment had fundamentally changed something within me. I woke up with the first rays of sunshine and the gentle sound of Alex's breathing. For a moment, I just watched his relaxed face in sleep. The lines of his expression softened, his dark lashes resting on sun-kissed skin. A sense of calm filled me, a calm so different from the constant anxiety that had been my companion for months. Carefully, so, as not to wake him, I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. The gesture, though simple, carried an intimacy that surprised me. How could I feel so connected to someone after so little time? Alex slowly opened his eyes, a smile forming on his lips as he saw me. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky from sleep. "Morning," I replied, leaning in for a quick kiss. We stayed like that for a few moments, enjoying the simplicity of the morning, until Alex sighed and his expression shifted ever so slightly. "We need to talk about something," he said, sitting up on the bed. My heart started pounding, that familiar anxiety returning. "Sounds serious." Alex took my hand, his eyes meeting mine. "Dylan closed the deal earlier than we expected. We're leaving this afternoon." His words hit hard. I knew this moment was temporary, though we both had separate lives waiting for us. But the reality of our impending departure hit me unexpectedly. "I understand," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Alex squeezed my hand. "I wish we had more time, Ethan. I wanted to explore what we started here." "How long until you guys leave?" I asked, trying to process the news while watching the morning light dance over his skin. "The flight's at 4. Dylan's probably already up, wondering where I am." Alex smiled sadly, his fingers still interlaced with mine. "Knowing him, he'll think I found some single executive at the convention." I let out a short laugh, though there wasn't much humor in it. Reality was seeping into our bubble fast. I didn't expect to feel this tightness in my chest so soon, this sense of loss for something that barely had a chance to begin. "I've never been good at goodbyes," I confessed, sitting on the edge of the bed, "especially when they come out of nowhere." Alex moved behind me, his arms wrapping around my shoulders, his chest pressing against my back. "Neither have I," he murmured against my neck. "But I'd rather have an unexpected goodbye after a night like ours than days of anxious anticipation." I turned to face him, studying every detail of his face as if trying permanently to imprint it in my memory. "You're right. If we had known from the start, maybe we'd have never let this happen. And that would be a shame," Alex added, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that carried as much desire as melancholy. We got dressed slowly, each movement laden with a meaning that wasn't there in the rush of the previous night. While Alex was searching for his t-shirt among the rumpled sheets, I realized I was trying to memorize everything. The way the light streamed in through the half-open curtains, the distant sound of the waves, the scent of his skin mixed with the sea air. "Got any plans for your last few days here?" Alex asked, trying to sound casual as he buttoned his shirt. "Not really. I guess I'll go back to my routine. Reading, swimming, designing boats that no one's ever going to build." I paused, realizing how sad that sounded now. "And you? What comes after Florida?" "I'm heading back to Seattle. I have a game project that needs to be wrapped up in the next few weeks." He hesitated, his eyes meeting mine. "You live in Miami, right?" "San Francisco," I corrected, immediately grasping the implication. 3,000 miles apart, practically like a whole different country between us. Alex nodded slowly. "It's not exactly a place for weekend flings." "Right?" I agreed, feeling the weight of reality. We weren't teenagers. We had established careers, built lives, commitments. A magical night didn't change those concrete facts. We finished getting dressed in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. When it was time to go, Alex grabbed his phone from the bedside table. "Can I have your number?" he asked, his voice mixing hope and resignation. "Not for, well, no expectations. I just don't want this to end like it never happened." I recited my number as he typed, feeling a strange formality after the intimacy we'd shared just hours before. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a simple message, so you know it was real. "Hey." I slipped my phone into my pocket, unable to find the right words for the moment. Instead, I pulled Alex in for one last kiss, slow, deep, filled with everything we couldn't say. "I'll leave first," he said when we broke apart, his forehead still pressed against mine. "Dylan's probably looking for us at breakfast." "All right," I agreed, watching him adjust his hair and take a deep breath before opening the door and stepping into the bright morning light, taking with him a piece of me I didn't know I was willing to give away. I waited a few minutes before leaving too, following the path to my own cottage with slow steps. The resort, with its tropical beauty and relaxed vibe, now felt strangely empty, even though it was just as full as it had been the day before. I spent the rest of the morning in my cottage, alternating between long showers, frustrated attempts at reading, and obsessive glances at my phone. Alex's message remained on the screen, those few words carrying more meaning than pages ever could. Around noon, I went out to have lunch, a part of me both expecting and dreading to see them. The main restaurant was as busy as always, but there was no sign of Alex or Dylan. I chose a table far away, the same one I'd occupied alone for days before meeting them, and forced myself to eat something even though I wasn't really hungry. It was when I was finishing my coffee that I saw them. Dylan came in first, flashing his characteristic confident smile, followed by Alex, who seemed to be searching for someone. Searching for me, I realized with a jolt of emotion. Our eyes met across the restaurant, and for a moment everything around us seemed to vanish. Dylan noticed where Alex was looking and followed his gaze until it landed on me. His face lit up with recognition. "Hey, engineer," he called out, gesturing for me to join them. "Come on over. We're having our official farewell." I hesitated for just a second before getting up and walking over, trying to keep a neutral expression while my heart pounded in my chest. Alex stood still, his eyes never leaving mine, a silent conversation passing between us that Dylan wouldn't understand. "Engineer, my friend." Dylan clapped me on the back when I reached him. "I was just telling Alex we should find you before we head out. We can't leave without giving a proper goodbye to the most mysterious man at the resort." "Are you guys leaving already?" I asked, as if I didn't already know, as if I hadn't spent the entire morning counting the hours left. "Unfortunately," Dylan confirmed. "Duty calls. The deal's done, and Seattle waits for no one." "Seattle sounds interesting," I commented, glancing at Alex, who had fallen uncharacteristically silent. "You should visit us sometime," Dylan suggested, completely oblivious to the tension in the air. "I'm sure Alex would love to show you the best bars in town. Right, Alex?" "Sure," Alex agreed softly, finally breaking his silence. "That would be great." Dylan checked his watch and let out a theatrical sigh. "Well, we need to finish packing. The taxi's coming in an hour." "I'm just going for a coffee," Alex said, nodding toward the buffet. "You go ahead, and I'll meet you at the cottage in a few minutes." Dylan nodded and then turned to me. "It's been a pleasure, engineer. Go back to the real world and design me a boat someday," he exclaimed, patting me on the back before leaving us momentarily alone amid the crowd. Alex and I looked at each other, 1,000 unspoken words hanging between us. So I began searching for something meaningful to say, something that could capture everything I felt. "It's going to be strange going back," Alex said quietly. "Back to real life, I mean." "Yeah," I agreed, understanding perfectly. This place, these days, had become an alternate reality where we were different versions of ourselves, freer, more open, braver. "Take care, Ethan," he said simply, his eyes conveying far more than his words. "You too," I replied, resisting the urge to touch him, to pull him in one more time. Alex nodded, a sad smile on his lips, before turning and leaving, following the same path Dylan had taken just moments before. I watched him go, carrying with him a part of me I hadn't known I was willing to give. That night, I sat on my porch with my usual whiskey, watching the same old ocean, but feeling fundamentally different. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky shades of orange and pink, the waves breaking on the beach in their steady rhythm, completely indifferent to the human dramas unfolding at the water's edge. I tried to slip back into my planned routine. The morning run, poolside reading, technical drawings of boats, but every spot at the resort now held the memories of the past few days. The lounge chair where we first met, The bar where our knees brushed under the counter, the stone path where our hands accidentally touched. The feeling of loss was so overwhelming, especially for something that lasted so little time. How could someone I'd met in just 1 week leave such a deep mark? How could a single intimate encounter reconfigure my understanding of connection and vulnerability? I took a long swig of whiskey, letting the amber liquid burn down my throat. I came to the resort looking for isolation, believing that distance and solitude were the cures for a broken heart. Instead, I found the opposite, the realization that it was the connection with another human being that could spark real healing. Alex and I were strangers who met briefly, but in those few shared hours we recognized something in each other that many people never find even after years together. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was definitely there. It was that rare recognition, that silent understanding that rendered many words unnecessary. My phone buzzed on the table, interrupting my thoughts. I looked at the screen, my heart racing involuntarily at the notification. Not a text message, but a connection request on a professional network. Alex Reeves wanted to connect with me, along with a brief note, for when our tides cross again. I smiled, swiping to accept the connection. It was a small gesture, maybe insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it carried a promise, not necessarily of a shared future, but of acknowledging that what we had lived deserved to be remembered. In the remaining days of my retreat, I kept up my routine with a few subtle differences. I ran along the beach a little farther each morning, as if testing my own limits. I chatted with the resort staff beyond the usual pleasantries. I dined at the main restaurant instead of ordering room service, allowing myself to observe and occasionally interact with other guests. Small steps, maybe, but significant for someone who had come determined to build walls instead of bridges. On my last night, I stopped by the poolside where it had all begun. The place was almost empty now. The business convention had ended, and most of the guests had left. I kicked off my shoes and dipped my feet into the warm water, watching the underwater reflections dance across the surface. I realized I was taking more than just memories from this place. I was taking a valuable lesson, that sometimes the briefest encounters can have the most lasting impact. That vulnerability isn't weakness, but a form of courage. That there's beauty in impermanence, in the ability to cherish a moment for what it is without demanding promises of forever. I didn't know if I'd ever see Alex again. Seattle and San Francisco were different worlds, our lives headed in separate directions. But that didn't make what we shared any less important. In fact, it made those moments all the more precious because of their rarity. When I headed back to my cottage to finish packing, I noticed a message on the professional app. The ocean that now separates us is only physical. The connections that matter transcend distance. Hey, I smiled, feeling a peace I hadn't expected. Some people enter our lives briefly, but change our trajectory forever. Alex was one of those people for me. A stranger who, for a brief moment, got to see parts of me I had forgotten even existed. As I packed the last of my clothes, I realized I was ready to go back to the real world. Not as the person who arrived 2 weeks ago, closed off, wounded, hiding, but as someone who had rediscovered the ability to feel, to connect, and to be truly present. And you, who came along with me this far, have you ever had an encounter that changed your perspective in just a few days? That unexpected connection that showed up when you least looked for it and left marks long after the moments became memories? Share your story, because maybe the most surprising thing of all is realizing that we're never alone in our most personal experiences, that our stories, no matter how unique they seem, echo in the lives of others. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. As for me, as I close this chapter of my life, I carry not only memories of a passionate encounter at a seaside resort, but also the understanding that sometimes you need to lose yourself completely to find yourself again. In the arms of a stranger in the ocean's waves, or in the most unexpected corners of your own heart.